and I didn't know what was the reason and the whole background, and I just picked up all my belongings and put suitcase up, left my apartment and went straight to Nepal, and started something without knowing what was going on. And later on, I found out that this was not a positive idea of the UN, but it was rather a dangerous idea to send me there as an unexperienced young crazy ideas architect to do something in this country, because that was at the beginning of democracy in Nepal after the fall down of the Rana dynasty of the Maharaja dynasty, and there was an idea of establishing contact with Nehru and with India, with the democratic movement, socialist movement in India, and that time Prime Minister, he was very interested in this. His name was Koirala, and he traveled also not only to India but to various countries in Europe, where he also met Kreisky and Palme, Olaf Palme, and many other socialist leaders, and they gave him ideas how to start with a new development, a new government, and new ideas. And amongst these ideas, there was also the establishment of town planning and of regional development. That was one of the socialist ideas of the Danish and Swedish and also Austrian politicians. And with these ideas, he came back and he put up a Danish architect planner to start this sort of town planning office in Kathmandu. But once the king, who was still the leader of the government, realized that things were going on in this socialist movement, he fired the prime minister and put him to death. He was put to, but they didn't execute the death, but he put him for lifetime in prison. And eventually, with the help of Kreisky, he was taken out of prison because he was very sick and put in hospital and so on. And then he finished, I think, his life in India as a free man. But it was, and I was sent there into this western nest, into this terrible situation, which I didn't know. I had no idea. You see, what was the reason why? And the UN want me to check what is going on there in Nepal. Could you do something perhaps in order to revitalize this idea, which was a socialist idea at the beginning? And I was not a socialist myself. I was no politician. I had no idea about politics because my ideas were something else. So I was never a religious person. I was in Austria. Everybody was very religious and very conservative, very ÖVP, which was very conservative. Particularly in Tyrol, where I grew up, everybody was very conservative, sort of Republican type. And then I was sent to. I was fond of Che Guevara, and when I was at Harvard, I had a photo of Che Guevara in my place where I was, so everybody was laughing. Pruscha is a fan of Che Guevara. But that was the time when they accepted this, and it was okay. And Kennedy era was that, but when I then arrived in Nepal and I realized eventually what was the problem, I started to do research in the countryside, in order to find out the real life of the people there. And I had a team of one Dutch fellow who was an economist, who was from the School of Economy in Amsterdam, famous school also, and Haka Guru, who was from Edinburgh. He was a Nepalese, but studied in Edinburgh geography. So the three of us, I as a physical planner, and the economic planner, and the geographer, we three traveled around and did research on how to improve life and how within the various regions. And then when we came back, I gave a big talk at the National Planning Commission, and they were all young, relatively young people in Nepalese who studied abroad and who had some idea and found this idea as very practical and very interesting. And then I got money from Ford Foundation, and Ford Foundation gave me money to build a building to invite these chiefs of local sort of population groups, to invite them to Kathmandu, to let them stay there, and to give them some initiatives. And so I built this cedar building, which is this building, with a central. It's in the book also. This cedar building, and it started very well. I myself gave also lectures there, and my friends in Nepal. And there must be further on. It's a big building. This is my own house. And this cedar building, that was the beginning of a new idea, in order to get these people and tell them how to argument within the parliament about their own problems, and in order to give them some basic education, how to express themselves about their problems. This is something, the idea of this cedar building. But then eventually my time with the UN was completed, and the UN was not too excited about this sort of political ideas of mine, and they felt, well, I have to return back. And so I went back to New York, and I went to UN again, and I told them I want to go back to Nepal. I got from the National Planning Commission of Nepal, I got very good letters for, they want me to come back and so on. So the UN said, no, we will now get an experienced elderly planner to go there and to continue the work. And they were happy about it. I started this initiative, which was lost already before in their mind, which is that I could get it going again, the idea of planning and of development. And so, but anyway, you are too young, and you're crazy, because many of my ideas to them in the UN, they felt it was not practical, because I also had many grand ideas also. But let's not talk about all this now, it's too far. But anyway, I went back to New York, and I was quite sad about that I couldn't go with UN. So I went back to Ford Foundation, because they were the ones who gave me the money for the building, which I did, which was my first building which I did in my whole life. You know, this big building, the 8-story building, you know, huge building, and very successful building, and it's the big one. Yeah, this one. Yeah, so I Ford Foundation, and I had met some people who were sympathetic to my ideas, and they said, well, if the UN doesn't take you there, we could give you a scholarship, and you do your PhD in Nepal on this field, and you go there, and I said, okay, wonderful. And I went to New York and to UN, and I said, ha ha ha! Now you will see. I wish good luck to your elderly expert. He will have a hard time because I'm going there now on the Ford Foundation grant, and I will work with the government on my terms, and you will have a hard time in order to fight my ideas there, where I have already a good standing. And they got worried about this idea, and they said, well, they will think about it. And then they came back to me again and called me and said, well, if you go there anyway, we'll send you there on our behalf again, but you will have to report once in 2 months in Thailand, in what is the capital of Thailand? Bangkok. In Bangkok, we have our regional expert in planning, and you will have to go there once in 2 months in order to discuss what you are up to and your problem, and he will give you a sort of advice and so on. So I said, okay, you know, if this man is okay, why not? Discussing is always good, you know, and dialogue, okay. So that was how I started my second term in Nepal. And I went to Thailand, you know, to Bangkok, and had this guy to talk with him. It was okay, you know, and I knew more than him anyway, because I was in Nepal almost at home, you know, but eventually, after a few months, I made the UN understand that it's a waste of time and money for me to travel to all the time, and I'll continue on my way. And they gave me the okay. And so the whole thing continued.
And what were you doing in Nepal?
I had I still had the commission to make a regional development plan for the capital region, for Kathmandu, for the future development of Kathmandu. That was my actually basic idea. But I found out right away that the major asset of the Kathmandu Valley was its cultural heritage. The buildings, artwork, and lifestyle of the local original population. That was the most important part. And therefore, I shifted the whole idea of planning towards research on historic monuments. Because I thought this was the basics. And so I got in touch with UNESCO, with the Director General in Paris, and I told him what I'm up to, and he was excited about, and I started almost on the second level of my assignment, because the UN didn't agree with this idea. But I started at the same time. I did regional development for the Kathmandu Valley, for the region. At the same time, I did research on the monuments and on the historic elements. And these two topics I could combine and lead towards a joint venture.
So that was your And now I'm slowly starting to understand the whole thing, because we know this very big publication you made about the Kathmandu Valley, which was really mostly about the monuments.
Yes.
And the urban planning part was something which is not always visible.
Yes.
So that was, so your idea was to really get the two
Yes.
together. So
Yes.
the cultural assets of the
Yes,
place and the urban
yes.
development, bring
Yes.
them.
Well, in the second edition of my Kathmandu 1-2, I made a section which I elaborated more about the regional development as well. But in the first edition, which was the old big one, the government wouldn't agree me introducing also the regional development, as I had in mind, because that was in a way a matter of land value to them. And my ideas of development were such to maintain most of the agricultural land and of the untouched part of the valley, to maintain it as it used to be, and to have only certain developments at fringes of the valley. And this they disagree with it. It's somewhere I made a sketch where I showed this idea of the fringe of the valley development. Yeah, but I don't know where it is now. But that was something that they disagreed. And eventually we had discussion with the Chinese, who were willing to do a transportation system in the valley, and I proposed a ring road at the edge of the valley towards the sloping up the foothills. And they built the ring road adjacent to the city, which meant that the road gave access to enormous amount of development, and all the agricultural land was taken. That was a terrible thing that happened. And when I realized this, I kind of quit and I left Nepal, and I felt there was no chance anymore.
So actually, we're also in Nepal, you're ahead of your time, because
Yes.
Because this thing about culture-based development, it's a relatively new concept, no?
Yeah.
I think in the 60s, 70s, Nepal, I'm sure this was completely alien
Yeah.
in the discourse. No?
Yeah. Well, that's how it is.
But what is-
but when I finally ended up in this Vienna again, I thought I could do something with education, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, but just before we come to Vienna,
Yes.
because this is something which is, I mean, one of the buildings that you did in Nepal, in Kathmandu, is one of the finest buildings that I believe you have done. I'm just trying to
Yeah. You need
Tarragon.
Yeah, but these buildings
Yeah.
were all example prototypes for a development which I considered at the fringe of the valley. That was the future. I thought to give example how future urbanization and future architecture could develop at this edge of the valley. And for that purpose, I designed several buildings. The Cedar building as an institutional building, as a kind of a university. Then the Tarragon as a communal meeting place, and several other housing, like I did housing for the Tibetan refugees and so on. I made, these are all prototypes which are not for that purpose, but for the purpose of urbanization, the valley.
Okay.
You see, but they didn't show up. They didn't agree to that. That was.
I see, but that's really interesting, because I mean it's fantastic architecture. But I can understand your frustration, because if this was just a prototype for
Yes,
you.
I wanted to start the whole valley the edge of the valley to build up in this way.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay, I'm hearing this really for the first time because I'm a huge fan, and also Philip, we love this building.
Yeah.
And we know lots of other people who absolutely love this building.
Yeah, well,
and I was just telling Alexandra that there is a new film just made last month.
Yes.
By some Nepali organization, very, very well done, about the Tyrolean hostel and this the museum now. It's a museum now.
Yeah.
Phenomenal architecture, absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And this is also something that I wanted to ask you, because here we see modernist elements, international modernism, but at the same time, the regionalism that you mentioned, and I think I also read somewhere that you were listening to Louis Mumford in your right, and so his concept was that of critical regionalism.
Yes.
And
exactly.
Right, yeah. So Mumford is someone, he was a giant, and we all. I envy you that you met him and you were listening to his lectures.
Yes.
Anyway, so this building for me is really this blending of modernism and regionalism.
Yes.
Can you tell us something about this? How did you come up with this? With the shapes, also the circle and the bricks.
Well, it actually, this type of building exists in Kathmandu Valley many times. And it was called pati. Pati. Very simple type of structures where they used to be built outside the city at the entrance to each of these towns. In Kathmandu Valley there are many towns, not just the three important kingdoms, but there are smaller towns also, very important ones. And they were all production centers for specific productions, and therefore they had a high level of handicraft abilities, and they had very often visitors from other parts of the country who were either buying things or learning how to do this and so on. So like pottery or metalworks or whatever, and they as I told you earlier, the living conditions in these towns are very dense, so there is no left space. So if there are visitors coming from outside to do some business or to learn how they would act, these people there, they couldn't be admitted because there were no hotels or no places, and to enter as a foreigner, as a person from another part of the country, into this local compact system, that's not possible. You see, because also of religious and many other. So therefore, they built so-called patis, which are small structures, similar like I built in Tyrol. These small structures, they were outside the cities, on the way to before entering the city. And these little houses, these little buildings, they were to stay overnight for visitors. They could go there and they could stay there overnight. These buildings had no doors and no windows. They were just spaces where they could go in and they could maybe cook something with their children, and next morning they would move on to the actual city. So these patis, they were very useful for, as I call it, for visitors. So they were herbergen, I would call them, you see. And this typology of the pati I have taken as an example. When these people, this women organization from Nepal, they came to me and asked me, well, we have problems with all these American and European travelers who only smoke hash, and they move into our houses and stay with us, and we don't get rid of them. We want to build for them a little hamlet somewhere outside that they could stay there and don't bother us and our daughters and inside the city. That was their reason. And they asked me to design. That's why I built this, you see. That was a typology that existed already. Not in the same way as I designed it. I added some elements of design, which is my design, you know.
Yeah.
Sure. But the concept itself is a local, regional idea, which I didn't invent. It is already there. And I wanted this system also to be practiced once we establish new developments at the edge of the valley, which was my basic concept for my actual assignment.
So Nepal was, how many years were you in Nepal actually?
10 years.
10 years, oh, okay. So 10 years, and then...
Zwischen 30 und 40.
Yeah, we are switching to English now?
Yeah, between 30 to 40 years. When I returned back to Vienna, I was almost 40. Yeah, 40.
So that was, again, a very big shift from a developing country with very exciting projects back to Vienna. What happened in Vienna?
Nothing, not much. Not much. I was not, I mean, I realized that in Vienna you could only survive as a designer, as Holland did, you know, which I was not interested in design, little shops or things like that. Or one family villas or something. So I was really disinterested in participating. And teaching, I was doing the same thing which my life before, taught the students. I went once a year, I went with the students to a developing country, some to Holland or to Finland or to even America. And another time always to India, Tibet, or Yemen, or to South America, to places where indigenous life still functions, or to Morocco or somewhere. I mean, so I did a lot of teaching by showing on the spot.
So but teaching became really your central activity, because you became professor at the Academy of Fine Arts.
Yes, but I was there professor for some time, and I realized that there were other professors there whose interest was quite different, and so there was always a kind of, not a fight, but a discrepancy, you know, and the only person whom I eventually got in was Sorkin as an urban designer, and he had already enough problems there himself, as he already described, with the other professors.
Yeah.
But I rather spent a lot of energy then for more than 10 years as a rector of the academy, where I really had the chance to redo the whole system of art, you know, because we had these old artists, you know, the famous artists of Austria, who were 40 years doing always the same. And
the master class model.
The master class system. And I got rid of all that, and I had new young international artists come in and to show the students other means. And Semper de Bo was a very important place how to practice alternatives for art production. And so that was a time where I really had, and I had then many contact with other academies, other art universities all over Europe, and this contact, was quite exciting. But well, architecturally, it didn't really, because the project that I was interested, I was trying to catch on some interesting projects, but they never worked out. In the last minute, some other politician came and took it away from me. So I was not really successful in getting projects going and showing by exemplifying project. The only project which I did when I was my own builder, Auftraggeber, that was Semper which I invented as an idea, and eventually I took over the management, and I took over the architecture, everything. It was complete my project, but this showed very successful. And even recently they made a plaque. There is also a copy of it, Eva has, where they write the Academy is thankful that I...
Yes, yeah. The Semper Depot is definitely one of the most beautiful and interesting spaces in Vienna, or I would say in modern architecture.
But all the other projects which I started, they didn't.
Yeah.
They couldn't be realized. That's a pity.
But talking about your legacy, because as I mentioned earlier on, why we think Philip and I have started to make short documentaries about how people and places are preparing themselves for the future. New imaginaries, reimagining our futures, new concepts, because we're living in a very complex time.
Yes.
And what we found so interesting with your approach was you began with very utopian technology, hyper-modernism. Then you went into critical regionalism.
Yes.
You were building with bricks. You vernacular architecture. Then you combine this hyper-modern utopian architecture with vernacular architecture.
Yeah.
And you were also really trying to address the problems.
Yeah.
And you were always driven by some kind of utopian vision.
Yes.
And this is the thing that Philip and I, we were discussing you very intensely.
But I tell you that there is no chance. If you see now, there is no more architectural school. There used to be the Cooper Union, there used to be the AA, and there used to be the SciArc in Los Angeles, and there used to be the Angewandte with Wolf Bricks, and there used to be my idea of a school in the academy, which was not accepted. It was just and at the moment, all these schools don't offer anything. The teachers are just puppets, I think, and there is no real substance, no chance. So I'm quite, and I'm talking about this with Wolf Bricks a lot because he's the only friend I still have, because all others have died meanwhile, and the rest of them are just puppets. And Wolf and myself are quite sure about this, that there is no school at the moment where these new ideas will be followed and will be found worthwhile in order to be taught or to be practiced. And so I myself couldn't. At the moment, I'm already tired and old, and have no
But
energy anymore.
Yeah,
So
I can understand that.
Yeah.
But your life is, I mean, you were always driven by passion
Yes,
with your
yes,
ideas.
yes.
So,
Well, but sometimes I get a letter from students, who were admiring me and telling me how wonderful my teaching was to them and how much. And recently, I got a letter from some student, and he said, "Well, the only thing criticism I still have, and I hope that you don't mind if I tell you this, that you are not a Jesus freak. I mean, for you, Jesus is not meaningful, and it's so sorry because I had hoped that you eventually, when you die, you will be also going to Jesus, and we might meet there, and continue our discussion about architecture in heaven." I mean, such students seem to take this serious, I couldn't imagine, that this is, they write me such letters, that, that well, because I surely had a lot of understanding all the time for religion, but not in the sense of Christianity, but in the sense of universal belief, also of Hinduism, of Buddhism,
no, but I can assure you, you have a fan club out there, which you probably don't know about.
No.
And there were actually some questions that your fan club gave to us to ask you. So I did ask you a few questions, and maybe I'll end with one question,
Please.
which comes from one of your fans, by the way, who you don't know.
Yeah.
And the question was, she said, I should ask you if there was, you gave a lot of interviews, if there was a question that someone never asked you, that you would have been interested in, a question that was never put to you.
If I would be interested in a question, to answer a question which was never put to me.
Yes.
I don't know the question. I can't imagine the question.
Something that nobody asked you, which is very relevant for you.
He should ask me.
Personally.
Yeah. Well, but I'm not sure I could help him as much as I can't help the other guy who want me to become a Christian again in order to meet me at St. Peter's residence in heaven.
Professor Pruscha, thank you for the interview.
So thank you both very much. I'm very delighted that you spent so much time talking to me.